right. Good evening. Thank you all for coming. I know this is a big game tonight, but we're going to have this music anyway. So I'm going to start out first with the classical stuff, and then I'll go into gospel. And with the classical, what I actually like to improvise something like I was doing before a little bit, something funny or fun. And let's do this. If I ask you for what's a familiar classical melody that you like? Anything? Something everybody knows that I know too.
Furleys.
Okay, Furleys. All right. So what I'm going to do with that? How about I try to do that in a 50s doo-wop style? I like combining things that they shouldn't be combined. So. So now I'm going to play some, wait a minute, I should move this. Now I'm going to go to the real stuff. This is Bach. I'm going to play first. The aria in D major from the Third Orchestral Suite. Everything I'm doing now is some sort of an arrangement because I love to pretend to be not a pianist, something else. So this piece is originally for violin and orchestra. The word aria means something that's sung, usually in an opera aria. But Bach didn't write operas at all. He didn't write a single one. He wrote cantatas for the church. And he was quite religious, you know. So I think that this aria has more of the mood of a cantata rather than an opera. So it's not operatic. And, you know, Bach, there's a great quote about Bach, and I think it applies here. Somebody said that when God speaks to angels, it sounds like Bach. But when angels speak to each other, it sounds like Mozart. So I like that quote. Yeah. It's thought-provoking. Is there some, I don't know. Here's Sorry about that, I'm not great with microphones. So. All right, so that's Bach. And now I'm going to play, this is an odd piece in a way because it's an arrangement of a Beethoven piece. This is Fritz Kreisler's Rondino on a theme by Beethoven. So what happened was Beethoven wrote this melody as a draft in 1793. He meant it to be part of his wind octet, but for some reason he discarded it. And Fritz Kreisler, many years later, 100 years later or so, arranged it for violin and piano. Here's a piano arrangement by a guy named Leopold Godowsky. So it's a triple arrangement. It's Godowsky's arrangement of Kreisler's arrangement of Beethoven. It's confusing. But this is an early piece of Beethoven, at least this draft, this fragment. He was 23 when he wrote it. And it has an innocence to it that his later stuff doesn't necessarily have. If there's time, I'll play part of a later piece maybe. But it's just very lyrical, which you don't always hear with Beethoven. You often hear some very, tense, terse kind of music. But this is just purely lyrical and beautiful and everything. So this is the Rondino on a theme by Beethoven by Fritz Kreisler. I'll do it with the mic, just put it on the floor, it's easier. All right. Yeah, and again, thank you all for coming. One of my teachers always told me, you play the same way for one person, 10 people, or 1,000, doesn't matter. Music's the same, right? So, here's another Godowsky arrangement. This is a very short piece, almost a fragment by Georges Bizet, a French composer. This is Adagietto from the L'Arlésienne Suite number 1. So Bizet, we mostly remember him for Carmen. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know. Which I can't sing because I don't sing. And I wouldn't do the role of Carmen if I were to sing. But at any rate, Bizet wrote lots of other great music, including these L'Arlésienne suites. This is incidental music, which means it's the background music for plays, for theater. And the word L'Arlésienne, it means the woman from Arles, city in France, in southern France. This piece sounds so French to me. I mean, I almost feel like I'm in a Renoir painting when I play it. It's just very French. So here it is. This is the Bizet, the Adagietto. Now for something a little more fiery, but when I play that, it reminds me of like a spring breeze, like we're having now, which is usually very lovely except for the pollen. So that's my problem with this time of year. So I'm going to play now 2 pieces by Robert Schumann. And Schumann he lived a very difficult life. He had a bipolar disorder, and it really affected his life. He didn't live very long. He only lived to like 48 or something. It's horrible. So the thing is that when he was a young man, he wanted to be a novelist. So he created these characters, these alter egos, and he would put them into his music. He would even write in the music what they were. The one was called Florestan, and he's over the top. He's energetic, passionate. The first piece is going to be that. The second one is called Eusebius, who is more moody and sad. And there's the obvious connection there. He had bipolar disorder, so some people say, well, that's the 2 sides of his personality, really, that he's talking about. So the first piece is his arrangement of a Paganini study. So I'm doing this violin theme, it really fits into it. Paganini was a great Italian violinist, and the Romantics, they saw themselves in him. In other words, Paganini was the really, in many ways, the inspiration, or one of the inspirations for the Romantics. He was a kind of a wild man, like a Jerry Lee Lewis type, like a rock star, really, of that time. And people like Liszt and Schumann and others, they loved that. They loved what they heard and what they saw. And, Paganini, actually some people thought he was possessed even. That's how wild he was. The way he played violin was wild. But what Liszt and Schumann did around the same time was they took Paganini's solo violin music and arranged it for piano. Think of a painter like Rembrandt or something. They would take paintings that they loved by someone else before them, copy it, and that's how they learned the craft. And I think composers, they do the same thing. But when you're copying something or arranging something like this, you're not simply writing out what's there, because this is a violin piece originally, so Schumann changed it quite a bit to make it work for the piano. So it's the same thing when you translate something from one language to another. You have to rethink it and reimagine it, or it's not going to work. It's just Google Translate. So this is Paganini. It's actually Robert Schumann's first Paganini study, and I might turn the volume down a little because it gets loud. It's not too loud out there, is it? Okay. This might be, so I'll turn the volume down. Maybe a little more. So you can see why people thought Paganini was crazy or possessed or whatever. It's wild stuff. And so now I'm going to play something by Schumann that's from later in his life, and it's of a completely different character. This is the second character, the Eusebius. So it's quite sad. And this is the Romance, Opus 94, number 2. It's originally for clarinet and piano. So I did my own arrangement for piano solo. You know, towards the end of his life, I'm sorry to be depressing here, but Schumann became institutionalized for he had bipolar, I was mentioning. He tried to jump into the icy Rhine River at one point, so it's really quite sad. And that's around the time that he wrote this. And there's a feeling of resignation in this piece. It's really quite sad. I'm going to play happier stuff later, don't worry. But there is, life has that side to it, and we can't just ignore it. So this piece, what to me is behind it, like wallpaper almost, is actually hymns, and Bach too, because Schumann loved both of those. He had Bach's music always on his piano, and actually, yeah, that Bach piece I played in the beginning, it's very hymn-like. I mean, what was he doing, Bach? He was writing church music, so playing the organ. So here's Schumann, the Romance, Opus 94, number 2. sad, but it's beautiful. And here's a piece, here's a composer that's not played every day. You ever heard of Joachim Raff, R-A-F-F? No? It's okay, neither have I. I mean, I hadn't until I played this piece. I really had never heard of him. He was a 19th century Swiss composer. And when he was alive, people said he's as great as Beethoven, obviously. But he's not played today. It's just too bad. I was listening to one of his symphonies in the car. The third symphony is in Walde, but in the forest. I don't speak German, so it's my attempt at it. Beautiful piece, just absolutely beautiful. And this piece is called Cavatina, short song. It sounds a bit like Schumann. It has the influence of Schumann. But again, I always say, I don't understand why he's not more well known. It's too bad. So Raff, R-A-F-F. You ever have if you have a moment this evening, like after the game, and you can't fall asleep, just find some Raff to listen to. So I think if it's okay with you, I'm going to play. We won't take a break. You know, we're small today. I mean, small in number, but mighty in spirit, right? I'm going to play a little more classical music, but this is going to be much more upbeat and joyful and everything. Because the stuff I played before, up until now has been mostly pretty mellow, which is fine. It's a mood, you know, but there are other moods, and we want to get into that. Then I'll go right into gospel and get you out in time for the game. It reminds me, before I played at St. Paul, I was the pianist here and choir director for a long time, 2017 to 2022. And before that, I was pianist and music director at a church in Texas, in rural Texas. I studied at University of North Texas outside of Dallas, so in the small town of Aubrey. And I'm still very much in touch with their pastor, who's now moved. He's actually in Georgia now, so. But he's very Texan to the core. And I remember oftentimes, and he's Texan, but he would talk fast. You know, some Texans talk fast. And service would start to say, "Good morning, folks. Cowboys kick off at noon, so we're going to get you out of here in 45 minutes. You know, and it was just, I just always think about that. He said, "Sermon's fast today. We got to watch the game, so everyone's going to get out of here." You know, so let's see what we'll do now. I figure I'll play. When should I end today? I think around 9, a little before 9. I don't know what. Is it okay? Okay. So then I'll play the Beethoven. It's okay if you miss part of it. You could check on your phone. You know, I mean, the game probably doesn't get interesting until later, so right? I mean, so you're all heroes for coming out here today. Thanks. I'm going to play this part of the Beethoven violin concerto. No fear, because last time I played the first movement, and the first movement is 25 minutes, so I'm not going to do that today. It's much shorter what I'm going to play. I'm going to play the third movement, which is just completely celebratory and happy and upbeat and everything. So the story of the piece, well, first violin concerto on the piano, so here's the story. Beethoven wrote the violin concerto in 1806. And the first performance was a dud. Most of the audience fell asleep in the first movement, because the first movement is very long, and it's very introspective and mellow, and it's beautiful, but people fell asleep. And so the violinist at the first performance, after the first movement, he turned his violin upside down. His name was Franz Clemente. Turned his violin upside down, improvised a lively country fiddle tune to wake everyone up. It's not our country music, it's Austrian Alp. Mountain people are not too different around the world. You could be in the Alps, you could be in the Appalachians, it's the same idea. Similar music, actually, I've found. So Beethoven was not thrilled with this whole spectacle. So he actually rewrote the piece for piano. That's what I'm playing. This is a little bit of my rearrangement because it's for solo instrument plus orchestra. So I can't bring an orchestra around, so I arranged it so I can, with the best that I can do with 10 fingers, try to play what the orchestra does too. So this is this alternative version by Beethoven himself of the violin concerto. So here's what was going on in his life at the time. He was losing his hearing, and he was quite aware of it. And for a while, he was very depressed. He wrote a letter to one of his brothers called the Heilige Stadt Testimony, which you can find it online. I recommend reading it. In most of the letter, he's describing how dark he feels. And he even at one point says he doesn't want to continue living. He wanted to take his own life even. But he found in himself this inner resolve to keep going, to keep composing. And he actually, the phrase, when there's a will, there's a way, applies to Beethoven magnificently, because he developed the capacity to hear music in his mind without even being able to hear. He lost his hearing quite gradually, and there's stories that he would take a walking stick at rehearsals, metal walking stick, put one end on the stage and another end on one of his front teeth, because the vibrations of that's again, where there's a will, there's a way. And Beethoven, he has this pattern in his music, in this piece. I played you last time the first movement, there's the first movement, the second movement, and those are quite philosophical. They're dark, in a way. One person said, this is music of philosophical acceptance, because that's what he was accepting, his hearing loss. But the last movement, which I'm going to play now, I'm going to play a little bit of the second, but segue into the third. The last movement is just a celebration. And it's also a country dance. It's a Ländler. Ländler is an Austrian mountain dance. It's a heavy, rustic thing in 3. The waltz is a relative of it, but it's a little heavier. I'll play part of it, you know. 1, 2, 3. So it's, you know, it's very hearty music. Probably, you know, people dancing to, I just imagine an Oktoberfest or something. It fits that, you know, a couple barrels of German beer, yeah. So this music, here's my image for the whole concerto. I'm only playing the last part now. But the first 2 movements reference nature a lot. Beethoven loved nature. It was his refuge from, you know, the world and also from his own problems with his hearing. And actually, the Romantics loved nature. I read somewhere because nature, being in nature was a reaction to industrialization. That's what was going on at this time, the age of industrialization. But they would go to nature as a sort of rebellion against that. So my image is that Beethoven in the first 2 movements is walking through the countryside and going through all these thoughts, you know, and again, it's very philosophical and very deep and everything. And then in the third movement, he runs across a group of farmers having a party, and he joins them. That's how I see this piece. And this pattern is typical in Beethoven, because you go much later to the Ninth Symphony, which everyone knows it. Listen to the whole Ninth Symphony. Most of it, and it's an hour or more, most of it is dark. And you know, it's really dark. But what do we have at the end is the ode to what? To joy. Yeah, because that's what Beethoven's all about. And I think that's why, you know, what is it, 200 years later, Beethoven speaks to us so directly, because he's a universal composer, because he has that hope in humanity, and there's this triumph of the spirit there. I love Beethoven. What can I say? And I think when I was a bit younger, sometimes I didn't quite get what Beethoven was about. And I mean, I don't know, I'm not claiming to, I didn't know him personally. But I feel like as I'm getting a little older, and you know, you get older, life happens. I feel Beethoven differently now, because it's, you know, you go through some things, and that hope, and that, anyway, I'll just play it because Beethoven's music is a lot better than my explanation of it. One more classical piece, then I'll do the whole gospel thing. This is Pablo de Sarasate, Spanish piece. Very different character from everything I've played. I don't think I've done this here yet. I try to do new stuff. I was here in November, and if I'm not mistaken, this piece became fully cooked for me in late November, so I don't think I played it for you, but if I did, I'm sorry to play it twice. This is the Habanera by Sarasate. And habanera is, of course, a tasty pepper on the one hand, right? But it's a dance, and we were talking about Carmen. The most famous habanera is probably from Carmen. That's the rhythm of a habanera. And a habanera is a mix of Spanish music, which Spanish music itself is a mix of many things. It's Arabic music, because it was Arabic in the Middle Ages and everything, gypsy music. But then Cuban music is you mix Spanish music with West African music. And that's where the rhythm comes from of the, bum, 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 right? So this again is originally for violin. This is a piano solo version. And for some reason, there's two things that come up for me. One is, this is not a very serious or insightful way to describe it, but I just imagine some sort of conquistador or something. It's just really Spanish, the sound of this piece. And it also would fit perfectly for a Looney Tunes, like a Bugs Bunny and an Elmer Fudd, because it's just, you'll see what I mean, or you'll hear what I mean. All right, let's get to some gospel now. I have a list here, not a Franz list, but that was a corny joke. I'm sorry. So just actually, this will be a good segue because this is something I actually wrote out, and it sounds a little bit classical in a way. This is Precious Lord, the way Mahalia Jackson sang it. I'm doing my best to emulate what she did vocally here. And Precious Lord was written by Thomas Dorsey. Not the big band guy, that's Tommy Dorsey, he's a different person. Yeah. So Dorsey, he wrote it. This is also kind of like with the Schumann I was talking about. It's very sad. Both his baby and his wife died in childbirth in the 1940s, I think. And he wrote this. It just, the words and the music came to him. And many years later, this song was prominent during the civil rights movement. This was actually Martin Luther King's favorite hymn, and he requested it to be sung at his funeral by Mahalia Jackson, the great, great singer. And she did. So I even read somewhere that, again, pardon me for being so dark here today, but after Martin Luther King was shot, he actually spoke the first words of the hymn as he was dying. So here is Precious Lord in the style of Mahalia Jackson. One more thing I said, there's a style, there are many different styles in African American gospel traditions, and there's one where there's no rhythm, there's no beat, and it's almost like a semi-spoken, semi-sung, and it's usually for the slower ones like this. So that you're going to notice there's no. The last thing I played, the last two things were dance-like. There was that rhythm and the boom. It has a beat to it, not the vegetable, but the tempo. So this doesn't have that. It's without time. right, now I'm going to do more gospel with some more improvisation. This is farther along. I'm going to do this in a slight country style and maybe a Texas country style, a contemplative country. There's a new word that I just made up, sort of. So, yeah. Let's see. Speaking of country, this will be really country. Will there be any stars in my crown? You know that one? There's a movie with the same name. It's free on YouTube, or at least last I checked it was. I watched it. It's good. 1950, black and white movie. It's a Western, and in the movie, I forgot the names of the characters, but one of the opening scenes, there's a pastor, it's a frontier town he's in, and he goes to a saloon because he wants to open a church, and he says, "Gentlemen, I'm here to preach my first sermon." And they start laughing at him, so he pulls out 2 pistols and says, "You're not going to be laughing now, I'm doing my sermon." So it's a good movie, and this hymn is sung throughout there. It's kind of a thematic thing for it. So yeah, will there be any stars in my crown? I need this list here to keep track of. Okay, now I'm going to do When They Ring Those Golden Bells, but I'm going to do it in 2 different styles. I think I might have done this when I was here with Dixon and Alan, but I don't remember. So, but I do, even with the classical stuff, it's written out, but I like to change it each time because you don't want to play it the same way twice. One of my teachers said, you can't step in the same river twice. So, actually, that's not one of my teachers. It's someone in ancient Greece, I think. So this is, I'm going to do this in two different styles. First in a straightforward way, sort of like the way Tennessee Ernie Ford sang it. And then I'm going to transition to more of a Jerry Lee Lewis style, which sounds a little bit like boogie woogie, but that style of music started in the Pentecostal churches. It went popular and mainstream later. So all the gospel musicians would say that. They say, no, we're not doing boogie woogie or blues. That started here in the church. So here it is. couple more here. Like I said, I'm going to get you out before, well, a little bit after 9 maybe, but this is a... Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, still 9:05, 9:10. I have a couple more here. So this is, now we're getting into some of the real upbeat stuff. So this is Woke Up This Morning. It's a spiritual. And what happened is, I was talking about Mahalia Jackson. The spirituals, with the Great Migration in the 1920s, they went north on the train lines to places like Chicago. That's where there was this big, I call it Southern gospel because it is, but a lot of the Southern gospel music, developed in Chicago. Thomas Dorsey was from Georgia, Mahalia Jackson was from New Orleans, but they were in Chicago most of their lives. At any rate, what happened is when the music got to Chicago, they kicked it up a notch or two. So, same with this. This is going to be quite, energetic. So, woke up this morning. Here it is. I think the words are, woke up this morning with my mind stayed on Jesus. And sometimes in the civil rights era, they would change some of the words. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. It's really interesting how the words would be. This song, We Shall Overcome, it's a spiritual. It's what it is. So here it is. Couple more here. This is one I love very much. It's called How Beautiful Heaven Must Be. And, you could play it as a sort of a country waltz. I'm going to change it a little bit. I'm going to do a different version, but the country waltz would be something like this. But, again, I'm going to gospelize it a little bit more. So here it is. The wire thing again. I'll do one more. So yeah, again, thank you all so much for coming out. I know it's a game night, as I said, it's a big deal. We care about our sports, you know. So this is Where the Soul Never Dies. I'm gonna do it in an upbeat country gospel style to close off. Again, thank you. I really appreciate seeing you and being here with you. So thank you. And thanks to Phil for organizing these wonderful events, and if you didn't get any food, do so. There's a lot, yeah, and if you don't get it, I'm going to eat it, so. Have a good evening, and see you next time. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, some food.